Wherever Christianity has been closely wedded with power, there have been privileged Christians who have used the Apostle Paul's words in Romans chapter 13 during times of uprising to claim a law and order society is the way that God wants things. And when they say that the Bible denounces rebellions like the one that we're seeing now, uprisings like we're seeing now, it seems at first glance like they may have a point. I mean, listen to what the Apostle Paul says in Romans 13. Let everyone be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except that which God has established. The authorities that exist have been established by God. Consequently, whoever rebels against the authority is rebelling against what God has instituted, and those who do so bring judgment on themselves. Now that seems pretty cut and dry, right? Well, not so fast. I have a question for you today, and that is, how do you reconcile the Apostle Paul of Romans 13 with the Apostle Paul of Acts 16? How do you reconcile the Paul of Romans 13 with the Paul of Acts 16? You see, in Acts 16, Paul and Barnabas are in the town of Philippi, and there's this slave girl who, as the story goes, is demon-possessed and can tell fortunes. And so her masters have used her spiritual captivity to make them money. And Paul, at a certain point, can't stand it anymore, and he casts the demon out, and with it, any chance that her masters are going to make that kind of money on her back. And that was considered by those masters a damage to their property, to their livelihood. So they took Paul and Barnabas down into the town square, and the magistrates, the powers that be, had them summarily beaten and thrown in prison without a trial. You see, they were going to teach Paul and Barnabas a lesson that the city of Philippi doesn't like rabble-rousers, doesn't like people disturbing the peace. So they subjected them to police brutality. In the morning, when Paul was told that the magistrates said that they could go, Paul said, "No, I don't think I will. I think they violated our rights as citizens by having us beaten and thrown in prison without a trial. And so they can come down here to the prison and escort us out publicly." You see, he wanted the shame of their abuse to be as public as the shame of his abuse. Now, when they gave Paul the order to disperse as they were walking him out of the prison and they told him that he had to leave town, Paul said, "No, I think I'll go and visit my friends first. Thanks. Then I'll leave." You see, it's the Paul of Acts 16, the one who freed a slave from spiritual captivity, thereby messing with someone else's paycheck. The Paul who was subjected to abuse of power. The Paul who was arrested for disturbing the peace. The Paul who publicly shamed the government officials for violating their rights and rejected the order to leave town immediately. It's that Paul of Acts 16 that wrote Romans 13. And so let's not get it twisted. Let's not believe that Paul meant something so simplistic in Romans 13, like, well, Christians must obey the government no matter what. The government is always right, so we always have to obey what they say. No, what Paul is saying in Romans 13, and what he must be saying, if he is the same Paul as Paul in Acts 16, is that Christians, what's out of bounds for us is anarchy. It's rebellion for rebellion's sake. We are not a people who resist living under authority just because we don't like authority, because we know what it's like to live under God's authority. But when injustices, when things that go against God's express will for his world are ensconced in our systems of government, when corruption causes the abuse of human beings and the corrosion of civil rights, we would do well to remember the courage and the strategy of the Paul of Acts 16.